Good morning and welcome to the live Q&A here in the Facebook group Manage Your Critic. I'm Cheryl Andrews, I'm the founder, and today's subject is about people pleasing. And one of the things I've seen, there's a book actually called A Disease to Please, and I want to talk about whether it is a disease or whether or not it's actually a strength, or when it is a strength for you. And how I'm going to do that is to talk to you a little bit about what it is, why I believe it happens, but for those of you who want to find more, just Google it. There is loads of psychotherapists out there that will give you lots of information about it. And then I want to be able to give you an action step, something that you can do after the event so that you can start to have a group discussion. Because that's what I want the live Q&As really to be about, is us to have a group discussion with each other about stuff. So people pleasing, what is it? Now, in my experience, people pleasing is that you will do anything in your power to make sure everybody else is happy. So if you look at the Manage Your Critic book, the very first chapter is, all I wanted was for everyone else to be happy. Now, this label of people pleasing has only sort of come to me this week. It's been a bit of an epiphany. I'm working with my business coach to help me get more clarity, again, about my business message and my next iteration, my next level of my journey. And I've also been considering my next book. And when I started looking back over my journey, I can actually see that even as young as 3 years old, I really wanted to please my parents. I wanted my parents to be happy with me. I wanted them to be happy, and I thought then they would be happy with me. I can see that, you know, even with my brothers and sisters, that's also something I was trying to do. My education, you know, the reason I worked so hard and why, even though I have a very poor long-term memory recall, I would get up at 3:30 in the morning and cram for that exam. I'd pass the exam and I would get, you know, I'd make my teachers happy, I'd make my parents happy. That was, you know, my drivers. A lot of my success for being who I am today has been driven by wanting to please other people. I was known as being really great at motivating people when I was in the Halifax as a manager, when I was a Slimming World consultant, when I was an area manager for Slimming World, is because I wanted to please other people. So I became very good at paying attention to what they wanted, what they needed, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and adapting my behaviour in order to please them, to make them happy. So I believe, and there's lots of things that if you want to know more about the psychology of it, if you just have to Google people pleasing or how do I stop people pleasing, you'll have loads of psychotherapists. If you're the kind of person that wants to know the science behind it and some of the history behind it, that's where you go. I'm the kind of person that I did a year of counselling, and whilst my work will bring up and go, oh yeah, I remember my parent did this, or my teacher did this, or my ex-partner did that, and you might find when the triggers were at the start for that behaviour. The part where I really come in is where people go, okay, I get that this is my childhood or my past experiences may have created this behaviour in me, but actually now I'm identifying that this behaviour doesn't work for me all of the time, and I want to be able to change the way that I respond to certain situations. So people pleasing, I believe, is a massive strength, like all of our behaviours. It makes me who I am today. It makes me somebody who's paid loads of attention. But when it doesn't work, and this is where the Manage Your Critic becomes so important, about changing the way that you listen to yourself and others, I discovered along my journey that, first of all, I was making lots of assumptions about what people did or didn't like. So for one of the things, you have body language experts out there who tell you that people like this are defensive. Or you see people going like that and you think they don't like you, or they don't approve of you, or whatever might be happening. And what I've discovered is that when you actually use the clean language process and you start really asking questions of those situations, you'll discover that that wasn't true. So I remember probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, I'd identified that one of my triggers for my critic to go off, and I'd have this sort of, and when I used to feel like I've been like really hit, my whole body, that's that expression when they say sticks and stones break your bones, but words can never hurt you, or names can never hurt you. Actually, the words used to really hurt me. So it used to physically hit me. And when I started paying attention to it, what it was, I was speaking and I would see somebody roll their eyes or tut or do whatever. And I started to learn to ask people what was happening for them. So not judging it, not calling them out that, you're So, and I'm still doing it today. I was actually out with my son this week. We were shopping and we were heading back for the car park, and I said, oh, I'd really like to go in here. And he went like that. And I said, I'm just noticing that I'm not really feeling comfortable shopping at the moment because I watched you roll your eyes. And he said, no, I just doing a really dramatic turn because I wasn't expecting to go in the shop, and I was having to sort of change my direction of my body. So that's me now coming, checking in with myself and noticing when I'm feeling uncomfortable and noticing what happened just before. And so this is the thing I want you to think about. If you're people pleasing, the chances are you have developed a really good skill to notice what people like and what people don't like. And some of that will be based on assumptions. Some of that will be based on judgments. It may even be based on what you would like to have happen, and therefore it may not be true. Okay, so that's the first thing, is actually to be clear about the fact that you may be trying to please people based on assumptions that are not actually true. So you might be changing your opinion, adapting your behavior. Now, when this becomes a challenge for us, and that's where the disease to please can be really challenging, is that if you are changing yourself to please other people, then sometimes you lose sight of what you actually think, what you actually want, what you actually need, because you've become such a good chameleon. You've been so good at becoming whatever everybody else needs you to be. And so you lose a sense of your own identity. And I know certainly for me, when I came on this journey as a coach, when I worked with Lucy Whittington, I wanted a title, and that's when I came up with the identity of the Strength Solution Detective. And what I've started to realise is that it is a massive strength for me. It's a component of who I am. But it was in my search to find out, who am I in amongst this system of other people. So when you adapt, it's a strength. But if you adapt and you lose a sense of yourself within it, or perhaps you've never known who yourself was. I really have had to work on this over the last 2 or 3 years, because I think I've been so busy trying to please other people since I was like 3 years old. I never really thought about what I wanted. And it's when I did the Do, Delegate or Ditch program, which I developed for clients, Mark took me back through my own program. We were modelling out our decision-making process, and he would say, well, this is what I want, and then I decide whether I've got enough money, and then I decide, you know, he has a thought process of he's sort of anticipating whether or not I'll be happy with it or not. And then if he thinks I won't be happy with it, there's another part that says, can I put up with her moaning if I still make the decision and she's not happy with it? And so that's his process. But when we looked at my decision-making process, I was checking what Mark wanted, what his children wanted, what my children wanted, what our parents wanted, what our clients wanted, what our facilitators needed and wanted that worked with us within the team. I was checking what, I'd have in the back of my mind, how that will impact the shopkeeper down the road. I had hundreds of people in my head that I was kind of trying to make this addition that, the power of and was a bit ridiculous. I'd like 100 people that I was trying to go, well, they want this and they and this and this and this. And what we discovered is that's why Mark could just check with me, because he knew I checked with everybody else. I was scanning for everybody else in our immediate circle. So by only checking with me, he didn't need to consider everybody else because he knew I would be doing that. However, what I wasn't doing was including what I wanted. So over the last sort of 3 years, Mark and I have been updating our decision-making process together, because he is now learning to adapt. So he's considering the impact on other people, not just going through myself. And I'm learning to bring to the decision that this is what I would like to have happen. And what's working for me is actually checking in with how I feel. I've noticed that I don't know intellectually what I want, but what I do is get a feeling of, this isn't really what I want. So I kind of know when I don't want to do something, and I feel uncomfortable. And I got used to suppressing that. I got used to ignoring that, because I would be able to ignore that and smile on the outside and say, yeah, that's fine, let's go and do that. Yeah, I'm okay, whatever. I can do whatever you want me to do, because I can, and I am happy to be very adaptable and flexible to do that. But what I've started to pay more attention to is whether or not I'm happy with it. And sometimes I take a little bit of time to process that, and sometimes it's just like a niggle from the past. It's got nothing to do with the situation, and I am still quite happy to be flexible and go along with the flow. And sometimes it is like, oh no, I've adapted 3 or 4 times, and now I'm feeling like I really need my thoughts and my position to be considered. So the first thing, if you're going to people please, when it can become a disease, is if you're making assumptions about what they want and you're changing your behaviour when actually they don't want it. The second thing is that if you don't include yourself in that people pleasing process, so are you pleasing yourself? Do you know what you like? One of the things I help people to do is do more what they love, and it's surprising when you sit down with a people pleaser is actually they've lost sense of what they love. So a good example for me is I've been craving and saying to people what I want. So clarity, I want to have some time on my own, I just want to chill out. So Mark goes off fishing, Liam goes and does what he's doing, and I'm sat here on my own, and then after about an hour I'm like, okay, I'm bored now. What do I do? And it's because I'm craving the time on my own, but then I haven't got anything to do. So I sit there and try meditating, I'm yoga, and then I'm getting agitated, and then I'm frustrated because I'm on my own. So I'm having to learn to be okay with my own company. That isn't something that I'm naturally gifted to. I am more, focused by being around people, but it's part of me developing my ability to actually think about my own needs and what I want. And what I discovered this week that works is I love sewing, as long as I'm fixing something that when people come home, they'll be pleased that I finished something for them. So I'm still people pleasing. And I think that's the thing, when you've got these behaviours of habits, you have to accept that they are your motivators. I am motivated by making other people happy. So I'm focused on weight loss right now because I know it'll make money for the charities. So I can maximize this behavior to my advantage, not to my detriment. So first of all, make sure that if you're going to please other people, you are doing what they actually want you to do, because not based on assumption, ask them questions, be curious about what's happening for them. Secondly, include yourself in those decisions to change your behavior. Make sure you're doing what works for you. And there are times, when you're a young mum, for example, and you have a baby who's dependent on you 24/7, you do have to, physically compromise some of your needs and wants in the moment for that child, because they need you at times when, perhaps you would like to have some sleep, for example. And that's okay. You can adapt your behavior. You can suppress your own needs and wants for short periods of time. And then the last thing is, it's also being okay to ask for help, because one of the downsides of being a people pleaser, and the things like the trap that I got into, was I was so busy wanting everybody else to be happy, and at times that was quite a burden, wanting to know how to get everybody happy. And that when I was unhappy, I didn't like to tell people I had problems. I didn't like to ask for help. And so I was very much on my own, and I felt very isolated at times. Even though I was surrounded by people who loved me, I felt completely isolated. So if this is how you're feeling, please use this community. This is the safe place. It's now a closed group for you to express if you need help with something. Talk to people in the group, find out. I want collaborations to happen from this group. And it's really important for you to check in. So you need to go back to clarity. What do you want? Thinking about how do you need to be and what kind of support might you need. But I know for me, I had friends around me and family who would say, I'd invite them to something, for example, and they'd say, oh, I can't make that. So they were okay saying no to me. And the assumption they made was that I would be okay to say no to them. But because I'm a people pleaser, I always do what I think will make other people happy. And I still do that. That is who I am, and I'm proud of that as a quality and a strength in myself. But what I would do to my friends, because I know how difficult it was for me to say no, what I would do for other people is I'd say to them, look, if you can't do it, just tell me, it's fine. And I'd reassure them I had different options. Now I was asking them first. And so I've got, quite a few of my friends and my family members. Mark in particular is a good people pleaser. So what I've learned to do with the people pleasers in my life is actually say to them, it's okay to say to no. I'll be all right. You're not my only choice. You're not my last option. There is other things I can consider. But likewise, I've also been asking my friends and family to make it okay for me to say no, because it isn't my natural default. So to say no to other people in order to help myself, to say I'm not available, I can't do that. And the only time I felt okay to say no to people was for work. And so that's why I then end up being someone who works lots of hours, and I wasn't very good at taking time off, which is not the case now. I do like my downtime. But I want you to think about, what is it when you're, what do you actually want? And when you're people pleasing, make sure you're pleasing something is actually what they want. Because what can happen is if you do all this helping for people and you've based it on assumption, you haven't listened, you haven't asked questions, you assumed they want the help, they then get frustrated with you because actually they were just letting you help them because they thought it makes you happy. but they didn't really need you to do the help. And then when it's not really appreciated, because you may be actually doing this behavior to get validation, to get approval, to know that you matter. And when you don't get that validation back, then you get into a spiral with people. You get really frustrated with them. So first of all, check they want it. It was one of the biggest things that used to go on with Paige and my daughter and I, is she would talk to me about a problem she had. And I would assume that she was telling me because she wanted me to fix it and she wanted me to help her. I would then do something to help her and she wasn't grateful. And then she'd say something like, well, I didn't ask you to help me. So then I had to learn to listen to that problem. So we talked about listening skills in the book about the download, realizing she is just downloading to me and she doesn't require me to do anything afterwards. The help that I can offer her is listening. And if I feel that she might want help, I ask her, so do you want any help or support with that? And invariably what's happened, so a good one for me, and you might find this with your own children, is that Paige might talk to me about not having money and whatever. I used to think, oh, I need to lend her some money, I need to help her out, she's stuck. And so then I'd perhaps offer money and then she wouldn't seem grateful and I'd get really frustrated with her, and because I was doing the people pleasing for validation, to get approval, to be, rather than just doing it because it felt like the right thing to do. I didn't realise I had this behaviour behind it that was wanting validation. So when I sat and talked to her about it, the last time we had the conversation, she said to me, oh, blah, 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 blah. I said, so how can I best support you? And she said, well, I'd really like you to help me break it down. She said, because I can't perceive whether I've got enough money to the end of the month. And I just know if I talk it out with you and I write it down, I will feel better about having enough money to the end. And when we mapped it all out with her, she actually did have plenty of money to the end and she was fine. Now, in the past, that conversation would have gone something like, I don't have enough money, I'm really worried. And I would say, do you want me to lend you some money to payday? I just offered the solution. And she may well have taken it because she did at the time think she didn't have the money. And then she may not have paid me back. And then I get frustrated. And so it was all based on assumptions. So if you're going to be pleasing other people, do make sure that you've asked enough questions that they actually consciously know that they're asking you for the help. And then you have to check in with yourself. When you give that, so let's say I gave money or I gave my time, what impact does that have on the things that I want to do? So if I give money away, will that prevent me from doing things that I want to do? How is that going to impact me? Because otherwise resentment builds up. So you have to make sure you've checked in with yourself that if you give this help or you do this thing to please the other person, what happens to your own happiness, your own health, your own well-being? And if you're not including yourself in the decision, then it will be difficult. Now, once you've got clarity of what you want and you have confidence that you're actually included in it, then when things change, so you've offered to help somebody, but then some new information comes in and now it's like, I don't know, let's say you've given your last penny to your daughter or your son, and then a big bill comes in and you could do with the money back. Then you have to be able to ask for help. And what can happen with people pleasing is when it comes with a disease is you think that it's okay for you to go and help everybody else, but it's not okay for people to help you. And actually you stop people. You actually, if people go, do you need help? No, I'm fine. Because for some reason, you don't want to look weak. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to stress people out. So you don't tell people when you actually need help. You don't clarify what it was. And if you're anything like me, as a people pleaser, what I would do is I would drop hints. And I've realised that dropping hints doesn't work. So I'd be going, oh, I really need a cup of tea. And then when my husband doesn't make me a cup of tea, I wonder why. And so, because he's not scanning in the same way to check about those things, although that's probably not a very good example because my husband would pick up on that one and make a cup of tea because we both have a people pleaser behaviour pattern. Now, with this behaviour pattern, I want you to think now about, are you, first of all, do you recognise yourself as being someone who likes to see other people happy? Do you see yourself as a people pleaser? So please put number 1 and just put yes or no, I am a people pleaser. 2, just think about, do you recognise that you do that in all of your relationships? So is it at work, is it at home, with your family, is it with friends? So just put in the question number 2 is, do you do that in every area of your life? And I always tend to work on the 3 core areas. So for personal relationships, business relationships, family relationships. So put a yes, no to those 3. And now that you know that, I want you to think about, when does it really work for you to be a people pleaser? And share, when is it an advantage? For me, I am able to make a massive difference in people's lives. I am an amazing motivator of other people. I know that I can motivate and encourage people to take action. And I know that, particularly if they are people pleasers, I become that support network that helps them to learn to ask for the help that they need. Because ultimately, when we're going through change, it's not easy. So think about your own thing. When you're people pleasing, when does it work? When does it work for them? And when does it work for yourself? And then lastly, when is it not working? Just share when it's causing frustration, when it's causing unhappiness for you. And then the last question will be, what would you like to have happen? And I will listen back to the video in a moment, and I'll type those questions up and I'll put them in the comment above. I think someone came online and went off. I don't know if that means that we've not got very good signal, but if anyone's been leaving comments, my apologies, because I can't see them today. So that's me, and it's now 8:20. As we don't have anyone on live, my plan was to be about 15 minutes talking and then have 10 to 15 minutes for Q&As. As there's nobody online, I'm going to finish the video today. Please engage with this conversation. Let's become a community that is able to please other people and ourselves at the same time, and that we don't have that overactive critic. Actually, I will finish with that, just as a bit of a summary, is that perhaps I haven't brought the relationship back to the manager critic in the book. If you are someone who's trying to please somebody else all of the time, people cannot be happy all of the time. And if you're pleasing them based on what you think they need rather than what they've told you they need, and they actually want, and they're consciously asking you for the help, they often won't appreciate it, they won't recognise it, they won't validate it. And if your driver for all of that has been to know that you're okay, that you're enough, that you matter, that you have worth, and that you're of value, often people pleasing on its own won't give you that. And I discovered it was because the way that I learn, I needed to hear things about auditory, I needed to see it. So I've been telling my friends about what makes me, and I've actually created a network of people who will send me cards, who will send me a text, who will tell me auditory, they will write, tell me about how I'm adding value. Because the truth is, I don't think I had that as a child. And even though I'm 50 this year, I did need some of that extra validation. It helped me to recognise I'm doing okay. And now I've got a peer support network that's doing that outside for me. I'm noticing that I can do it for myself. I catch myself noticing that I'm adding value, and therefore don't need the endorsement of other people. And when you get to that point, then you're kind of, I call it's like a feeling of being topped up inside of your own worth, your own value. It's like the love from you radiates out, and it kind of creates like this sci-fi kind of shield, that when people criticize me, it just lands on the outside and fizzles, and I'm like, okay, so what I'm doing now isn't pleasing to this other person. And I can go back to curiosity and go, okay, so when I'm being me, that's really frustrating you, and ask them what they'd like to have happen, and I'm going to listen to what they want me to do and how they want me to be. But if the person they want me to be isn't who I want to be, I can say, that's not how I do it. That's not who I am as a person. And I can be okay with that. So hopefully that's been of value. Please do let me know the answer to the questions, and let's make this a community where we can all take care of each other. Happy Friday.